Thanks, Joe. I'm going to endeavour to be a little bit faster on this one and not tell quite as long stories, which is always a problem of mine. So I'm going to talk about why we are committed to social justice. Oasis Church Waterloo has been running since 2003. There has been a church on that site for hundreds of years. But when Steve came to become the minister of what was then called Christ Church and Upton Chapel, now Oasis Church Waterloo, it used to open its doors at 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and they would have a service for an hour, and then they'd close the doors at 12 o'clock. And the next time the church was open was 11 o'clock the following Sunday, where they would do exactly the same thing again. And so our job always was to try and open those doors as wide as possible for as long as possible for the whole community. And so now, if you did come down to Waterloo, you would see there's a big church spire out the front, and everything that we do is based within a 500-metre radius of that church spire. And within that 500-metre radius, there's a primary school, a secondary school, a farm, a children's centre, a ton of youth work, an open access community space, which is open all day, Monday to Friday. We do debt, housing, benefits, immigration advice. We run the food bank for the whole of Lambeth. We do a load of other bits and pieces, and still at the heart of it is a church service that meets at 11 o'clock on a Sunday. And people often say to us things like, but it's lovely that you do all these things like running the food bank, but like, what about the gospel? Why aren't you actually saving people to go to heaven? And all these kind of questions. You know, it's lovely to do a food bank, but it's not the gospel. That's a nice thing, isn't it? And so one of the ways in which we kind of talk about what we do and why we do it is to look at the word that is translated as saved and often as salvation in the New Testament. It's a Greek word, and the root of it is sozo, and that's the word that appears in the story in Acts 27, where Paul gets shipwrecked. It's Acts 27, verses 27 to 31, and it talks about how the censors found that the sailors found that the water was 120 feet deep, and they were dashed against the rocks. And then it says, Paul says to the centurion and to the soldiers, unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved. Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved. Obviously, what Paul meant there was, unless these men stay with the ship, you can't go to heaven. No, he didn't mean that at all. What he meant was actually being saved from being shipwrecked, being rescued in the here and now from the storm that they were in. It meant save us now. We've made salvation into what happens at the end of our life. But when lots of these stories were initially written, it was about saving people in the here and now, not about whether we go to the good place or the bad place when we die, but how we can save people from the hell that they are currently living in today. So what does that mean for us, and why do we do the things that we do? How are we to work out what salvation means to me in Waterloo? Well, I think it looks like the Waterloo Food Bank, which last year fed 30,000 people. Or I think it looks like the benefits advice that we run, where we fight for people, for example, who have been turned down for personal independence payment, PIP. And so far, we've taken on 15 of these cases where people have been turned down for money that they deserve and money that they need. And we take them to tribunal, and we have a 100% record in getting these appeals overturned. See, the story of the gospel, the good news to me, is about the here and now, and not just about going to heaven after you die. We're called to so much more than that. At Oasis, we often say that if the good news really is good news, it has to be good news for every person at every level, physically, spiritually, socially, economically, environmentally, educationally. What that is the practical outworking of another Hebrew word that you find in the Bible, shalom. Shalom is often translated into English as peace, but it means a lot more than that. It means completeness, wholeness, nothing missing, nothing broken. Jesus came to bring shalom. And that's why all our churches are so integrated into our communities. It isn't that we're following Jesus, which makes me a nice person, which is why I run a food bank. It's that the very act of running a food bank, running a debt advice centre, running 2 schools, that is the good news of Jesus. That is the gospel. It's the practical outworking of what we believe. Building inclusive communities where everybody gets to experience life, and life in all its fullness, reaching their God-given potential. I think that's a pretty good gospel. Joe?